Emily Dawson stepped out of the taxi and onto the smooth marble floor of the Ocean View Resort. The warm sun kissed her skin, but she felt a chill run through her as she observed the stark contrast between her simple appearance and the luxury that surrounded her. Dressed in a modest beige dress, she felt small in comparison to the lavish decor and well-dressed guests who walked past her, their designer outfits sparkling under the chandeliers. Her hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, a style she had worn for comfort, not for attention. This wasn't her first time at such an event. Emily had built a successful foundation that helped provide scholarships to underprivileged students, but she was no stranger to the feeling of being underestimated. Her modest background often made people question her worth, and today, she was about to experience it once again. She walked through the grand lobby with purpose, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. As she approached the front desk, the receptionist, a young woman named Lily, greeted her with a bright smile that quickly faltered as she looked Emily up and down. Lily's eyes lingered on Emily's simple dress and then shifted to the guests in the lobby, who were all impeccably dressed in high-end clothes and accessories. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Lily asked, her voice polite, but there was a hint of judgment in her tone. Emily smiled gently. "I'm here to check on the arrangements for tonight's gala." "It's for the Dawson Foundation," she replied, her voice calm and confident. Lily hesitated, her fingers dancing over the keyboard as she searched for Emily's name. "I'm sorry, but I don't see your name here. Are you with one of our guests?" "No," Emily said softly. "I'm actually the founder of the Dawson Foundation. My husband, Thomas Dawson, is arriving by yacht later today." Lily's smile disappeared, and her brow furrowed as she looked back at Emily. "The founder?" she repeated, not quite believing it. "I'm sorry, but I don't see your reservation in the system. Perhaps there's been some confusion." Before Emily could respond, a man in a sharp suit approached them. He had been listening from a distance, and his smile, while polite, didn't reach his eyes. His name was Jacob Peterson, and he was the general manager of the resort. "Is there a problem here?" Jacob asked, his tone more dismissive than concerned. "There seems to be some confusion about my reservation," Emily said, trying to maintain her composure. "I'm Emily Dawson, and my husband is on his way. He's been a regular guest here for years." Jacob glanced at Lily, then back at Emily, his gaze sharp. "You're telling me you're the founder of the Dawson Foundation?" he asked incredulously. "The same foundation that holds charity galas? The same foundation that's known for hosting only the most prestigious events, and you're here, alone, dressed like this?" His words dripped with disdain, and Emily could feel the weight of his judgment on her. "Yes, that's correct," she replied calmly. "I prefer to handle these things personally. My husband has nothing to do with the way I choose to dress." Jacob's laughter cut through the air, loud and dismissive. "Excuse me, Miss Dawson, but I have to tell you, I've never heard of anyone who runs a foundation like yours looking like, well, you. This must be a mistake." Emily's heart sank, but she remained composed. She wasn't surprised by the reaction. She had faced this kind of treatment before. As a woman who had come from a humble background, many had doubted her capabilities, assuming that she didn't belong in the circles she now frequented. "I have ID," Emily said, reaching for her purse, but Jacob waved her hand away dismissively. "Please," he said with a sneer. "Anyone can print a fake ID these days. We can't have just anyone claiming to be someone they're not." "Security," he called, his voice firm. Two large security guards appeared from around the corner at his signal. The guards approached Emily, their expressions stern and unwelcoming. Emily noticed a few guests in the lobby turning to watch, whispering behind their hands. She could feel the eyes on her, but she didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that the opinions of others didn't define her. "Please don't make this difficult," Jacob said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We can't have you wandering around here claiming to be someone you're not. Just leave quietly and we won't make a scene." Emily stood still for a moment, considering her options. She could argue, raise her voice, but she knew that wasn't the way to handle this. She wasn't here to prove anyone wrong with words, she was here to show them through actions. "May I at least use the restroom before I leave?" she asked quietly, maintaining her calm demeanor. Jacob hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Make it quick," he said before turning away. The guards followed her as she made her way toward the restroom, their presence looming behind her like a shadow. Once inside, Emily locked herself in a stall and pulled out her phone. She quickly typed a short message to her assistant, Sarah. "Code Cinderella at Ocean View Resort. Initiating protocol." The message was simple, but it set the plan in motion. Within moments, she received a response. "Understood. Initiating protocol." A small smile tugged at Emily's lips. She and Thomas had been through this before. This wasn't the first time she had been dismissed because of her appearance, and it wouldn't be the last. But this time, she had a plan. Instead of fighting back, she would let the truth unfold on its own, in a way that would teach those who underestimated her a lesson they wouldn't forget. When she stepped out of the restroom, the guards were waiting, their arms crossed. "Miss Dawson, Mr. Peterson has asked us to escort you off the property immediately," the taller guard said with a smirk. Emily nodded, not a hint of anger in her expression. "Of course," she said quietly, as they began to escort her through the grand lobby. Jacob watched from behind the front desk, his face filled with satisfaction. "Perhaps next time you'll make a reservation under your own name," Jacob called after her, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "We only host the Dawson Gala because Mr. Dawson is a valued patron. His wife, well, clearly she lacks the taste to match his status." The guest in the lobby snickered, but Emily held her head high, ignoring the laughter. She wasn't about to let their words break her. As she reached the front doors, she turned to the guards and smiled politely. "I'll be sure to pass along your hospitality to my husband," she said softly before stepping out into the warm coastal air. The door shut behind her with a soft thud, and she walked down the long driveway toward the street, her steps unhurried. She knew that the story wasn't over. Far from it. In fact, this was just the beginning. After being dismissed so unceremoniously from the resort, Emily Dawson found herself standing in the warm breeze, the sound of the ocean waves lapping gently against the shore. The contrast between the cold reception she had just experienced and the peaceful surroundings was striking. It was as if the world outside the walls of the resort held no judgment, no preconceived notions about her worth. As she walked away from the entrance, Emily glanced at her watch. It was just past noon, and she had just over an hour before the next phase of her plan would unfold. She wasn't upset. In fact, she was oddly calm. She had learned to remain composed in situations like this, having faced similar dismissals and assumptions throughout her life. She had grown up in a small town, worked tirelessly to build her foundation from the ground up, and dealt with more than her share of prejudice. Today was no different. Emotions like anger and frustration were fleeting, and she had long since learned that they didn't serve her. Instead, she focused on what came next. She didn't need to defend herself or prove anything to the people who had doubted her. They would learn soon enough that appearances could be deceiving. The city street in front of the resort stretched out before her, lined with cafes and small boutiques. She chose a quiet cafe with a clear view of the harbor. The soft hum of the outside world seemed distant as she made her way inside. She greeted the waiter with a polite smile, asking for a simple iced tea. She had never been one for extravagance or attention, and today was no different. She wanted nothing more than to sit quietly, gather her thoughts, and watch as the pieces of her plan fell into place. Sitting at a small table near the window, Emily observed the activity around her. The ocean breeze fluttered through the open window, carrying with it the scent of salt and fresh air. The world outside seemed unaware of the drama unfolding at the resort. Here, in the simplicity of the cafe, no one cared what she wore or where she came from. It was peaceful, almost therapeutic, and she allowed herself a few moments of quiet reflection. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the calm. It was a message from Sarah, her assistant. "William is furious. ETA 100 minutes. Package arriving in 20. Emily took a slow sip of her iced tea, letting the coolness soothe her. She wasn't worried. William had always been fiercely protective of her, and she knew he would be just as determined as she was to make sure this situation was rectified. His temper was legendary, especially when it came to matters of respect and dignity. But he would also understand the bigger picture, the lesson she hoped to teach those who had underestimated her. She checked her watch again. Just under an hour before William's arrival. The next phase of their plan would unfold in a little over 20 minutes when the package from Sarah would arrive. This package wasn't just any ordinary delivery. It contained the tools she needed to transform herself. To shift from the woman who had been dismissed earlier to the elegant and refined Emily Dawson, the wife of a billionaire. As Emily sat back in her chair, the sound of a car pulling up outside broke her concentration. She turned toward the window and saw a sleek black vehicle pull up to the curb. The driver, a woman in a crisp uniform, stepped out and quickly walked toward the cafe. Emily knew exactly who it was before the driver even reached her table. Maria, one of their most trusted staff members, had arrived with the necessary items. Maria approached with a respectful nod, her professional demeanor matching the luxury of the items she carried. "Mrs. Dawson," she said softly, placing a garment bag and a small suitcase on the table. "Miss Sarah said you needed these urgently. Is everything all right?" Emily smiled, nodding graciously. "Just a small misunderstanding. I'll be fine," she replied, keeping her voice calm and reassuring. "Thank you, Maria. Would you like something to drink?" Maria shook her head politely. "No, ma'am, I should return." Mr. Dawson was quite determined when he called, she added with a slight smile. "I'll see you later then," Emily said, standing up to give her a hug. "Please tell William I'll be fine." Maria smiled warmly before turning to leave, her footsteps echoing softly in the cafe. Emily took a moment to gather her thoughts, knowing that the time had come to put her plan into motion. She stood up, gathering the garment bag and suitcase, and made her way to the restroom. The transformation was about to begin. Inside the restroom, Emily quickly began to change. Her simple beige dress was replaced by an elegant cream-colored designer gown, the fabric soft and luxurious. She carefully let her hair down from its neat ponytail, allowing it to fall in soft waves around her shoulders. As she adjusted the delicate diamond necklace that William had gifted her on their first anniversary, she couldn't help but smile. This was more than just a change of clothes. It was a statement. It was a moment of reclaiming her dignity, a quiet act of defiance against those who had judged her. When she stepped out of the restroom, she felt different, not just in appearance, but in the way she carried herself. Gone was the woman who had been humiliated at the resort entrance. In her place was a woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to show it. As she walked back toward the promenade, she noticed the change in people's reactions. Where before she had been invisible, now people glanced her way with appreciation and respect. The same people who had once ignored her now gave her polite nods, their eyes following her as she passed by. She continued her walk, her steps confident, as she made her way back toward the resort. She knew she was about to deliver a powerful lesson, not just to the manager who had dismissed her, but to everyone who had ever been underestimated or judged based on their appearance. The stage was set, and the grand entrance was moments away. Emily Dawson strolled confidently down the promenade. The transformation she had undergone not only affected her outward appearance, but also her inner resolve. The soft breeze carried with it a sense of calm, but also a renewed sense of power. Her gown shimmered in the sunlight, and the diamond necklace, a gift from William, caught the light, adding an extra layer of sophistication to her already graceful presence. The world around her had changed. She was no longer just the woman in the beige dress who had been so easily dismissed. She was Emily Dawson, the founder of one of the most influential charitable foundations in the country, and the wife of one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the world. As she neared the resort's grand entrance, she could feel the eyes of the staff and the guests turning toward her. The casual glances she had received earlier had transformed into respectful stares. No longer was she an invisible figure, she had become the focal point of the crowd. Some guests who had earlier whispered about her now openly watched her with curiosity. The change in how she was perceived was striking, and it was just the beginning. Emily kept walking, her head held high, but her mind was calm and focused. She knew what was about to unfold. As she approached the entrance, she could see Jacob Peterson standing near the front desk, speaking to a few guests with a smile that looked forced. His gaze quickly shifted to Emily, and his expression faltered, for a brief moment before he regained his composure. It was as if he had just realized that he had made a grave mistake, a mistake that was about to cost him more than he could have ever imagined. Jacob took a few steps forward, trying to mask the unease that had begun to creep into his posture. He cleared his throat and offered her a tight smile. "Ms. Dawson," he said, his voice too strained to sound genuinely welcoming. "I'm so glad to see you've returned. I trust everything is to your liking now?" Emily's eyes met his with a quiet intensity, but she didn't immediately respond. She simply nodded, her composure unshaken. She had learned to deal with people like Jacob her entire life, those who judged her based on appearances and assumed her worth. But now, as she stood before him in all her grace and elegance, she knew that the tables had turned. She wasn't just a guest at the resort. She was about to show him what it truly meant to underestimate someone. Jacob's eyes darted nervously, from her to the other guests who were now noticing the shift in the room's atmosphere. The whispers had started again, but this time they weren't filled with mockery. They were filled with curiosity and awe. Emily could sense the change in the air. The resort, which had once seemed like a place where she didn't belong, was now her stage. "I must apologize for earlier, Ms. Dawson," Jacob continued, his voice faltering slightly. "It was a misunderstanding, and I'm truly sorry for any inconvenience we caused you." Emily smiled softly, but it wasn't a smile of forgiveness. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly how the world worked and how justice would soon be served. "Thank you for your apology, Jacob," she replied calmly. "But it's not just about an apology, is it? It's about respect, something that was sorely lacking earlier." Jacob's face reddened, but before he could respond, the sound of a luxury yacht approaching the marina caught Emily's attention. She didn't need to look at the clock to know it was William. Her phone had buzzed moments earlier with a simple message. "On my way. 2 minutes." As the yacht, the Sovereign, made its grand approach to the marina, it was as if the very earth trembled under its magnificence. The massive, pristine vessel glided through the water, its gleaming white hull cutting through the waves like a knife. It was a yacht that could dwarf entire resorts, a yacht that signified not just wealth but power. The crowd that had gathered along the marina, mostly resort guests, turned their heads in unison to witness the arrival of the behemoth. Jacob's face drained of color as he realized that William Dawson's yacht was the same one that had been discussed earlier. The yacht that had been built specifically for him, a floating palace worth over $200 million. Jacob's earlier confidence melted away as he realized the gravity of his mistake. He had dismissed the wife of this very man, and now she was about to walk right into the resort, not as an outsider but as the queen of this domain. Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself as she turned toward the entrance where the yacht was about to dock. She knew William was on board, but more importantly, she knew the lesson she was about to deliver would be far more powerful than any words could express. This wasn't about showing off wealth. This was about showing Jacob, and everyone else, who had doubted her, the value of character over appearance. As William's yacht docked, the air seemed to hum with anticipation. The staff at the resort were now scrambling, their earlier confidence replaced with nervous energy as they began preparing for the arrival of the billionaire. Jacob, now fully aware of the monumental mistake he had made, stood frozen in place, his eyes glued to the yacht as it gently docked at the marina. The gangway extended from the yacht, and Emily's heart swelled with pride as she saw her husband step onto the dock. William Dawson, tall, distinguished, and exuding quiet authority, was the epitome of elegance and power. His tailored suit fit him perfectly, and his silver hair, neatly combed, added to his timeless appeal. Emily's breath caught in her throat as he walked toward her with purposeful strides, his eyes searching for her in the crowd. When their gazes met, William's face softened and a slight smile tugged at the corners of his lips. He reached out to her, his hand steady and strong, and as she took it, she felt the weight of the moment settle around them. She wasn't just a woman walking into a resort anymore. She was Emily Dawson, and with her husband by her side, no one could question her worth. As the crowd parted to allow them to pass, Jacob stepped forward hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Dawson," he said, his face pale, I cannot express how sorry I am for the mistake we made. Earlier, it was inexcusable." William turned his piercing gaze on Jacob, his voice calm but firm. "Mistakes can be forgiven, Jacob," he said slowly, "but they come with consequences. And I think you've learned something valuable today about judging people based on their appearance." Jacob nodded quickly, his face flushed with embarrassment. But before he could say anything more, William turned his attention back to Emily, his hand gently guiding her forward. "Shall we continue?" he asked, his voice warm and reassuring. Emily smiled softly, her heart full of love and respect for the man beside her. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when the world would see her for who she truly was, not just for how she looked. Together they walked toward the resort's grand entrance, leaving behind a humiliated Jacob and a crowd that had learned an important lesson about judging a book by its cover. The soft clink of champagne flutes and the murmur of excited chatter filled the air as Emily Dawson and William Dawson made their way through the resort's grand lobby. The world had shifted. It wasn't the glittering chandeliers or the opulent decor that captured people's attention now, but rather the quiet power that radiated from Emily as she walked confidently beside her husband. Her calm demeanor, her grace, and her unshakable sense of self were like a silent declaration that nothing could shake her worth. Not the judgment of others, not the mistaken assumptions about her, and certainly not the way she had been treated earlier that day. As the crowd parted to let them through, Emily could feel the weight of the eyes that followed her every step. But this time the gazes weren't filled with whispers of doubt or derision. They were filled with awe, respect, and recognition. Emily had never craved the spotlight, but in this moment she allowed herself to savor the sweet satisfaction of a well-deserved shift in perception. She wasn't just walking through a luxury hotel now. She was walking into a place where her worth would no longer be questioned, where she would be recognized for who she truly was. William, standing tall and composed as always, turned his head, briefly to look at Emily. A small smile played on his lips. He didn't need to say anything. She knew he was proud of her, of how she had handled the situation with grace and dignity. William had always supported her, but today it was clear that Emily had taken control of her own narrative. She wasn't just a woman beside a powerful man. She was a force to be reckoned with in her own right. "Tonight's gala," William said, his voice low but purposeful. "It's not just about charity. It's about reminding everyone here what truly matters: character, integrity, and respect. You've already shown them that." Emily smiled, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "I don't need to prove anything to them," she replied, her tone calm but resolute. "But this night, William, this night will be a reminder to all of us that true wealth isn't in what we own, but in who we are." They reached the grand ballroom where the gala preparations were underway. Staff members scurried about, placing floral arrangements on the tables, adjusting the lighting and preparing the stage for the evening's speeches. There was an air of excitement that filled the room, but it was the quiet hum of anticipation that really caught Emily's attention. This was it, the culmination of all their hard work, the unveiling of a vision that had been carefully crafted for years. But as much as the gala was about raising funds for the foundation, it was also about teaching a lesson in humility and respect. A lesson that Emily was about to deliver to those who had judged her too quickly. Inside the ballroom, Jacob Peterson stood nervously by the front desk, shifting from one foot to the other as he glanced at his watch. He had been summoned to attend to some last-minute preparations, but his mind was elsewhere. The earlier encounter with Emily and William had left him rattled. He had seen how easily the world could be flipped on its head when people were treated with respect. It wasn't lost on him that his treatment of Emily had been nothing short of disgraceful, and now he had to face the consequences of that. Whispers of the staff as they scurried about only made Jacob more uneasy. He had heard the murmurs, the quiet acknowledgement that he had made a grave mistake, but it wasn't until he saw Emily and William enter the room that he truly understood the magnitude of his error. He watched them walk side by side, their presence commanding the room. It wasn't just William's wealth or status that made them stand out. It was the way they carried themselves. They didn't demand respect. They simply exuded it. "Mr. Dawson," Jacob said, his voice tight as he approached William, "I want to sincerely apologize for what happened earlier today. It was a complete misunderstanding, and I take full responsibility." William turned his gaze to Jacob, his eyes piercing but not angry. "I'm glad you understand the severity of the situation," he said calmly. "But what I don't understand, Jacob, is why you felt the need to treat my wife as if she were unworthy of being here. Do you know who she is? Do you know the impact she's had on so many lives?" Jacob's throat tightened. He didn't have an answer. He had been so quick to judge Emily based on her appearance, so sure that she didn't belong in the circles he moved in. But standing before her now, he saw the depth of her character, the strength of her resolve. He realized that he had misjudged her in every way possible. Emily watched the exchange with quiet intensity. She wasn't looking for an apology. What she wanted was for Jacob to learn something about respect, about humility, and about how easily people could be dismissed because of their appearances. She stepped forward, her voice soft but clear. "Jacob," she said, her tone not accusatory but thoughtful. "I don't need an apology from you. What I need is for you to understand that every person has value, regardless of how they look, what they wear, or where they come from. I want you to think about the way you treat people from now on, because when you dismiss someone because of their appearance, you miss out on the opportunity to see the richness of their character." Jacob stood there, silent, as her words sank in. It wasn't lost on him that he had just received one of the most valuable lessons of his life, and it came from the very person he had humiliated only hours before. He couldn't meet her eyes, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his actions. "Thank you, Mrs. Dawson," Jacob said finally, his voice quieter than it had been all day. "I'll remember this lesson." Emily nodded, her smile gentle but knowing. "I hope you do," she replied, before turning her attention back to William. She could sense his pride in her, but it wasn't the kind of pride that came from wealth or status. It was the pride of knowing that they had just made a difference, even in a small way, in someone else's life. As the gala began, the crowd gathered to hear Emily speak, and as she took the stage, she knew this night wasn't just about raising money for the foundation. It was about giving people the chance to see beyond the surface, to see the truth in one another, to understand that respect and kindness are worth more than any material possession. As she spoke, her voice resonated with power and clarity. She didn't need to shout or demand attention. The room was silent, hanging on every word she said. And as she finished her speech, the applause that followed was genuine, heartfelt. "This night," she said, "isn't just about giving. It's about showing up for one another, seeing each other for who we truly are, and helping each other become the best versions of ourselves." The crowd stood, clapping, and Emily felt the warmth of their admiration. She knew that her journey wasn't about proving herself to anyone. It was about reminding others that true wealth was found in the heart, not in material possessions. As the night unfolded, Jacob watched from the sidelines, a changed man. He had learned something far more valuable than any business deal he could have made. And Emily, standing beside William, knew that her quiet strength had made an impact that would last far longer than any words could express. As the evening continued, Emily and William left the ballroom, their hearts light, knowing they had not only made a difference in their own lives, but in the lives of everyone who had witnessed the power of respect, kindness, and self-worth.